Hey, welcome back guys. In this video, I'm going to show you how to retouch any photograph inside Photoshop using a technique that is called frequency separation. Let's get started. Alright, let's start by understanding what frequency separation is in the first place. So it is just a technique that helps you to retouch a photograph inside Photoshop by separating the image into two parts. To understand it better, let's start retouching the photo. Now, one thing you need to do is to always work non-destructively, okay? Make sure all the layers that you create, you can always come back and do some modifications if something goes wrong. So let's start by going here on the layers panel and making a copy of the background because we don't want to work on the original background. Press Ctrl+J. That adds a copy. Let's hide the background for now and let's just rename this layer to blemishes. Alright. Now, even after renaming this layer, I'm going to add an empty layer above it. This layer will be the retouching layer, so I'll rename it to retouch. Now, what I'm going to do is to select the top layer here, which is empty, and switch to the spot healing brush tool. Now, at this stage, I don't want you to overdo this process because frequency separation is actually going to help you out. But it is always a good idea to spend some time to remove those little bumps here and there which might give you trouble later on. So select the retouch layer. While the original background is hidden, make sure sample all layers is checked, because if this button is not turned on, Photoshop will not be able to read anything here because this layer is empty. Select the retouch layer and gradually begin to paint to remove those dark spots on the image, as you can see me do here. Alright, after doing the retouch, let us see the before and after. So here are the blemishes the way they were from the beginning, and this is how they look on the retouch layer. Now let's put both layers inside one group and call it retouching. Now as you can see, the original background is still hidden. So let's add one visible copy of the retouch layer we have done on top. To do that, you have to press Ctrl Shift Alt and E. Ctrl Shift Alt and E. That is going to add a stand visible layer on top. Then let's add one more copy of it by pressing Ctrl+J, and the layer on top, let us call it texture. Now, like I said from the beginning, frequency separation is actually a technique that is used to separate an image into two parts. One part of the image will contain the natural colors and the other part will contain the bumps or the textures or the roughness part of the image. So let us hide the texture layer on top for the moment and let's select the color layer. Now as you can see, the visible textures are still there, so let's blur away everything, okay? So to do that, you go to filter and then you choose blur and add a Gaussian blur. Take the radius down to 0 and start increasing it from here. You can press these buttons to zoom in and out. You can also hover inside the preview window here to sample any portion you want to see clearer. Now I think my main area of focus should be the forehead here because you can see the colors here are uneven. So the way it looks right now is going to help me determine the radius I'll put here. So at this stage, it is left for you to examine your own image and know exactly the radius you put here. I'll start by increasing the radius gradually to evaluate until I see that all the textures here have been blurred out. 29 is too much, I'm going to take it down to 20. Now I can still be able to identify her eyes, her mouth, and the nostrils, which is very important. Don't cover up everything, just click OK. Alright. So this is what we have done so far. We have simply come to the color layer and removed every texture that was there, okay? We got rid of every texture, every bump that was on this particular layer. Now let's do the opposite on the texture layer. We want to get rid of every color and retain just the roughness. To do that, you first need to enable the texture layer and determine whether your image is an 8-bit image or 16-bit image. To determine the bit depth of an image, simply come beside the document and look here. As you can see, there is a little 8 there. That tells you that this image or this document is in 8-bit mode. You can also convert this document to 16-bit by going to image and then choosing mode. As you can see right here, you can send it to 16-bit or 32-bit. The bit depths of an image represent the total number of colors in that particular image. So an image with 16-bit has more colors than an image with 8-bit, and an image with 32-bit has more colors than an image with 16-bit. But most of the times, our eyes will not even be able to dictate them. So work in either 8-bit or 16-bit. The technique I'm going to show you here applies for 8-bit, but it is also very similar to 16-bit as I'll demonstrate. So, since we know that this image is 8-bit, let us select the texture layer. Then let's go to Image, and then let us choose Apply Image. When this window opens up, you get the source. The source is simply the name of your document. As you can see, my document says image right here, and we have image here as well. Now, the most important thing you need to do is to make sure that these other layers are turned off, or even if they are on, you need to sample a particular layer that needs to be subtracted. So in this case, click on Layer, and then choose Color. Because the texture layer is above it, and the color layer is directly below it, we need to subtract the colors from the texture to retain just the textures. Alright, after choosing color as your layer, simply come to the blending mode and choose Subtract. Once you choose Subtract, input a scale of 2 and an offset of 128. These are universal values, guys, they work all the time. Now, if your image was in 16-bit, which means you will see 16 beside the image right here, what you will do will be to change the blending mode from Subtract to Add. And then you will come here and input a scale of 2 and an offset of 0. Then simply hit Invert. You see we get the same effect. But since my image is 8-bit, I'm going to uncheck Invert, change the blending mode from Add to Subtract, and then input a scale of 2 and an offset of 128. We get the same result. Then just click OK. Now let's understand what we have done here so far. The layer on top here retains just the textures without any color, as you can see, and the layer below it retains just the color and not the textures, as you can also see. Now the next thing you want to do is to enable the texture layer here, change the blending mode from normal to linear light. If you have done this step correctly, put everything inside one group like so, press Ctrl+G to group them, and let's just call this frequency separation, FS. Now let's enable the retouching layer because that is where we made some adjustments. Let's enable it and let's see the before and after. So I'll disable the frequency layer for the moment. As you see, everything looks exactly the same. Whenever you have done frequency separation and you notice that the image is distorted or the eyes are not looking the same, know that you have missed something, you have missed a value. So if you do it correctly, your image on the frequency separation group should be the same with the image here. Now that this is out of the way, let's hide this group again. And let us now expand the frequency separation group and then select just the color layer to work on it further. Now let's hide the texture layer. With the color layer selected, you can see that even though we applied the Gaussian blur, the blur did not actually even out the color or the skin tone. So to even out the skin tone, we are going to use the mixer brush tool. So go to the brush tool here, click and hold for a while. Then select the mixer brush from here. Now, on the options bar, you have to adjust these settings. Don't work with the default settings. The first important setting is to make sure that you are working with a soft round brush. Now, click on this down pointing arrow and choose Clean Brush because notice it is currently loaded with the foreground color which is black. So let's clean it. It becomes transparent. And let's disable this icon because with this icon turned on, Photoshop will automatically load the brush with any color that we sampled. So let's click to turn it off. Instead, the second icon here, let's turn that on. It is very useful. Photoshop is going to clean the tip of the brush every time that we sample any color to paint. It's very useful. Now come to the wet value. It simply determines how wet the brush is, and let's take it down to a value like 10 and set the load to 75%, mix 90 and the flow 100%. And at this stage, let us make sure sample all layers is not checked because this time we want Photoshop to consider the colors that are within this specific layer and not on any other layer. So with those settings in mind, increase the size of your brush and paint in a specific order. You don't just paint. Paint the portions that have even colors separately and paint the other portions that have similar colors separately as well. So I'm going to start painting somewhere around here, just like so, as you can see. I'll come to the portion with the highlight and just paint on it in a circular form because I don't want to mix the highlights with the surrounding portion. This is what you need to keep in mind. Since you have understood what to do, I'm going to fast forward and see you when the whole process is over. Alright, after completing this process, what you have to do is to enable the texture layer above it, and this is how everything looks right now, guys. This looks beautiful. I'll come over here and then collapse this group and enable the retouching group. Now let's see the before and after. This is how the image looks with the painting, and this is how the image looks without the painting. Now let's spend some time to even out the skin tones even more. So enable this group again and select the color layer. This time let us allow the texture layer open. Now switch to the lasso tool, and before you actually begin evening out the skin tones, come here on the options bar and increase the feather option right here. The feather option is simply going to make sure that the edges of your selection appear to be so smooth. If you take the feather down to 0, there will be very sharp edges. So I'll increase the feather option here up to 15, and then I'll just start evening out the skin tones. I'll select the forehead from here, and then what I'll do, I'll go to filter, and then I'll choose blur and apply Gaussian blur. Now the first Gaussian blur value we input here was 20. Let's simply multiply this value by 3. Click the mouse inside this box and press the star button on your numpad and input 3 there. Then press the tab key and let Photoshop do the math for you. Now it is 60. This value is already remembered, so let's click OK. As you can see, this portion becomes smoother. Let us use this same technique to apply it to the other portions. So I'll select this portion right here beside the eye bags and even it out. This time I'll just right click and then choose Gaussian blur. If the effect is too much, right click immediately after applying the Gaussian blur and choose Fade Gaussian blur. Take the opacity down, and it is the way it was. Gradually increase the opacity up to find a sweet spot. Alright, according to me it occurs about 46, so I'll just click OK there in that particular selection. I will do the same thing here. And this is how she looks right now, guys. Let us again see the before and after. I'll collapse this group, and then here's how it looks right now, and this is how it looked before. Huge difference. Now that the lady's face has been retouched, the next thing we are going to do is to compare it with the original background. So let us hide the retouching group and let's enable the original background. As you can see, this is how she looked before, and after the retouching and frequency separation added, she has this natural skin tone. Now after this, the next thing I'm going to do is to make sure the focus is on the lady's face. I will first start by adding a brightness adjustment layer. I'll come here and then just choose brightness and contrast, and of course I want the brightness and contrast layer to only affect the layer with the frequency separation, so I'll clip it. Now I'll just take the brightness down. Now make sure the max is selected. Then go to your brush tools and select the normal brush. Right click and make sure you choose a hard round brush. Now simply increase the size of your brush. So I'll select the max, select my hard round brush, and make sure the foreground color is set to black. Then I'll just paint ever so slightly here, just once. Let us now go to the max properties by going to the properties panel with the max selected, and then let us click on the max properties here. Now let's increase the feather value to add some softness to the edges of this selection here. So I'll just increase the feather value up to like 168. Yeah, that makes sure everything fits so nicely with the background, but the lady's face is still in focus. Now I'm going to add one more adjustment layer, and that is the curves adjustment layer to it. I'll simply come here and choose the target icon right here, and then I'll simply click on this portion with the highlight, click there and then just drag it up to correct the image. Then I'll also click on any portion with a darker shade and take it down. And I also want this to affect just the group with frequency separation, so I'll clip it here. And I'm going to put these two adjustments into one group, just like so. Now let us again see the before and after. So this is how the document looked from the beginning, and this is how it looks right now. So this is really what I wanted to show you in this video, guys. As you can see, I introduced some very powerful techniques in this video that will even take your retouching work to a whole new level. So if you got value out of videos like this, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Comment down below to let me know so that I'll even bring more content like this. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next one tomorrow. Goodbye.